We hear a lot about reconciliation when it comes to First Nations, Métis and Inuit people, but what's actually being done and who's doing it? Jody Wilson-Raybould has a history lesson and a new way forward in her new book, True Reconciliation: How to Be a Force for Change. And she joins us this morning. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So this book is such an important history lesson because it includes the oral history of Indigenous people and non-Native people, and it talks about things that we weren't taught about in school.
Yeah, I sought to, there's three parts to the book. The first one, learn where the oral history is. I sought to tell the story of the history of this country through the voices of individuals, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who were there at the time. And I mean, I hope it's powerful for people. And I think at the heart of being able to achieve true reconciliation is for all of us to learn the true history of this country. And we do that through listening to other people's stories and lived realities. So yeah, I'm proud of the oral history part and the telling of the true history of Canada.
And one of the most important lessons I learned was about, the history of the numbered treaties. We hear about numbered treaties, but I did not realize how they were meant to be permanent. And it was, quote, while the water flows and the sun rises, but yet they're being changed now.
Yeah, I mean, the true intent, spirit and intent of the treaties have never been lived up to by any government, and this has been an ongoing struggle among Indigenous peoples that have treaties to have them lived up to. Likewise, for Indigenous peoples in this country that haven't signed treaties to have their rights, their Aboriginal title and rights recognized. This is the efforts of Indigenous peoples over many generations and other Canadians who are agents and advocates for Indigenous rights.
You talk about true reconciliation being a marathon because we've got to basically redo centuries of damage. But you say that so many times, like, and we hear government announcements and we think, oh, this might be the one that actually makes things happen. But you describe them more as sprints, and sprints running around and not really accomplishing anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I like that analogy. I mean, so many times reconciliation isn't one event. Reconciliation, or true reconciliation, as I described in terms of a marathon, takes place over time. We're never going to be 100% sure when we achieve reconciliation, but this is a constant effort and acting by individuals, Canadians and governments and communities to build on steps to actually achieve ultimately closing the gaps between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples, and recognizing that we have built, moved away from injustice and built more harmonious, interdependent relationships, which we need to have certainly in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. And you say it's a lot more than, wearing an orange shirt or recognizing National Truth and Reconciliation Day, leaving shoes on a former residential site. That's good, but we need to keep doing more.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are good. Those are good for raising awareness, and Canadians' awareness about Indigenous issues in the history of the country is higher than it ever has been. But action, which I talk about in the book, action needs to continue to build, needs to change our current reality and move away from injustice. Symbolic and performative reconciliation acts, yes, can be important, but they can't be the focus. It doesn't lift a child out of poverty or recognize an Indigenous community or nation's rights and assist in rebuilding nations.
Mm-hmm. You want people to be in-betweeners. Tell me about that.
I do. I want, and I believe there's so many Canadians that are in-betweeners. We live in a reality right now, and this is where I sought through that oral history to talk about the silos that have been built up in our society as a result of the history of colonialism and assimilation, silos that are seen and unseen, so much so that we do not understand each other, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. We need in-betweeners, people that bridge between the silos and seek to break them down through understanding our distinctiveness and the different worldviews that exist, and through that build those harmonious relationships. I think that we all can be in-betweeners, acting within our own lives and our own spheres of influence to change the dial, to change the discussion into a more positive environment where we do build those more just and harmonious, loving relationships.
So much importance in this book. True Reconciliation, How to Be a Force for Change. Jody Wilson-Raybould, thank you for writing it. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.